Hello, I am Sonya Madison,
And I'm Jonathan Mason.
and welcome to Law Unfiltered, where we talk about current events and the legal implications underlying them. Now, this past Friday, one of my favorite restaurants, even though I haven't been there for a long time, Gladys Knight Chicken and Waffles, is being sued by Gladys Knight herself, alleging that they're misusing their likeness. Do you know a lot about this one?
Yeah, I read into it a little bit.
Can you kind of walk through what she's claiming as well as the facts she's using to support her claim?
Well, basically, in this case, obviously she's a celebrity. And when you're a celebrity, and she's a pretty well-known celebrity and has been in the public eye for decades, really, then your name has value. And I don't know the history of her son going into the restaurant business, but she at some point agreed, and they actually have an actual written agreement dating back to 1999, if I'm not mistaken, where she lended her name, likeness, and certain intellectual property, and I did air quotes because it's kind of generic and it's not really clearly defined other than things like photos, maybe costumes, some of the maybe recipes I think they mentioned, and also even the name or references from some of her songs are the names of some of the entrees in the restaurant. And so she was under this agreement with her son for a period of time dating back to 99. It expired. They loosely renewed their agreement, not formally in writing, but some sort of a verbal agreement. And when you have verbal agreements, it's always difficult to prove exactly what the agreement was. But I don't think there's a dispute that there was a verbal agreement to allow him and his company or companies to continue to use her name in association with the restaurants,
Or at least in association with the written agreement. So it's like we'll agree to renew until we say otherwise. Is that kind of what you're thinking about this verbal agreement is?
I get the feeling that it's kind of like, it's a mother and son. It's not like, like a totally arm's length business transaction, even though it is to some extent. And just perhaps they didn't feel like the need to be that formal in renewing it. They had an existing agreement in place. It provided for what she was going to get in return, which essentially was royalties from the sales of the restaurant.
Okay, so here we have a mother and son. Obviously, I'm presuming Gladys Knight at some point said, you know what, I want to help you out as my child. I want to help you achieve success. So here we are, 2016. Obviously, something went wrong.
Well, something apparently had been going wrong for some period of time, if the allegations are taken as true. But how it came to a head this summer is her son Mr. Henderson was arrested, and based on charges from the state of Georgia for basically for pocketing or not paying state sales taxes and meeting other obligations. And so essentially they raided the restaurants, which I think at the time they had 3 in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And one of them is closed, and I think it closed after the raid took place, but it may have been before. But in any event, there was more than one location. And so they come in, and they make all these allegations about him not paying employees on time, using money from the business for, illicit uses, things like that. And so his mother is like, oh, wait a minute. I can't be associated with this because this is, I have sort of this impeccable reputation in the industry, so I can't be, for lack of better terms, associated with these shenanigans. And so she reached out and terminated the license that they had, which a license is just nothing but permission for someone to use a particular work or someone's name or song or whatever it is, in this case her name and likeness. So she said, nope, no more, that's it. I want you to stop doing that.
Okay, so she's reached out to her son, I guess at some point, I imagine, after or before his arrest, when it starts going down. to remove my name and my recipes and all this kind of stuff. So if he had done it, which I'm assuming he hadn't, would we still be here, or is it the fact that he hadn't done it and she still has her name associated with this that we're now in this position?
Well, I assume that that's a good question. Whether he did it or whether he took steps to stop using her name or not, I can't say. But the fact of the matter is, her name is still being used even to this day with the restaurants. Once the raid took place and he was arrested, then the restaurants were closed for a few days maybe, and then they reopened. But when they reopened under what's called receivership, and for the benefit of the state of Georgia, for the taxes that he owed. So receiver is just simply a person or a company that comes in and they take over the operations of a business. I've had other lawsuits where a receiver was appointed, where I even have one now where, which you're familiar with, where one person says, you know what, this person isn't treating the business fair, they like a business, they're taking money out, they're not paying bills. So in order to protect the business assets, we need someone neutral to come in and run the business in a professional manner and maximize the profits of the business and that sort of thing. And so that's what the state did. The state was like, you know what, we're not gonna, it's in our best interest to have the restaurant still operating because it can be bringing in income, but we're not gonna let him or his companies continue to operate the restaurants because of the way, clearly the way they've run it in the past. It's not necessarily going to be in the state's best interest to allow them to keep running it. And so this receiver was appointed.
So then is it possible that, I guess, he could make the defense, or the other entities that she's suing aside from the state, because I don't think the state's listed, could he make the defense that I don't have that control or that power to take your name off of, you know, this restaurant?
Well, I mean, essentially that's what his attorney has said. They're like, look, we agree. He even signed an acknowledgement that he no longer has the right to use her name. But his attorney is saying, look, we're not using her name. We're not operating restaurants. We do not have possession of the restaurants any longer. The state has come in. They're the ones who are continuing to operate the restaurant using her name. And as an aside, also Ron Winans' name is also attached to the restaurant. It's Gladys Knight and Ron Winans, Chicken and Waffles. And we haven't heard anything from him. Don't know the nature of any relationship or legal agreements he would have with him. But I thought if one of the two people was concerned, then maybe both of them would be concerned. But anyway, that's what his attorney is saying. Like, you need to go talk to the state, or you need to go talk to the receiver. And her attorney has sent letters to the state notifying them of this position and that they need to stop using her name in association with the restaurants. But they're not party to the lawsuit. Whether they be added or a future lawsuit, I'm not sure. But as of now, they're not.
So aside from removing her name...
Well, I should say that. I should clarify. There were two lawsuits filed, a complaint and an amended complaint. And I know you look, well, I don't know if you looked at it or not. Okay, no problem. There was an amended complaint, which I admit I did not review closely. I just looked at the original complaint. So it's possible that there were some additional allegations or parties added. So I just want to add that disclaimer because I do understand that there was an amended complaint filed, but I just didn't have an opportunity to review it.
So, well, obviously, there's not going to be too much bad blood between the mother and son, so the son is going along with her and saying, hey, I don't have this right, you need to talk to someone else. But what else is she seeking aside from the removal of her name?
Well, and also, one thing I don't know is that her son is named individually. There are 2 or 3 other entities that I assume are entities that are operating the restaurants, one or more of the restaurants. So I don't know how many other people are involved, in those other entities that may have some input or control into this. But essentially, she's filed lawsuits based on her claims based on the use of her likeness. Because basically, she's saying, look, at one point you had permission to use my name and likeness. Now you don't. So the continued use of it is a violation of my right of publicity. So she's filed a right of publicity claim. Right of publicity is basically the right of a celebrity to capitalize off their name or likeness. And so that's one of her claims. She's filed a claim under the Lanham Act, which deals with a few things, including advertising, trademarks, things like that. And so under the Lanham Act, there's a section of the Lanham Act that prevents or prohibits false advertising or false or misleading advertising or false endorsement. And so one of her claims is, you're misleading I've withdrawn my license and my consent, so now you're misleading the public into thinking that I'm affiliated with I'm still affiliated with your restaurant. And so that's and she would be entitled to damages if that's in fact what they were doing. I think the main thing she's seeking is just a discontinuation of the use of her name. She just wants them to stop using her name, and more than likely, I would think once that happens, then, I don't know if the monetary compensation is really what she's seeking. She just wants her name. And one of the things that either in the complaint or in some of the letters that were exhibits to the complaint, she mentions that she's talking to other entities about starting a restaurant or lending her name to another restaurant group. So she doesn't want to be tied to this anymore. And, she just wants to move on to other opportunities. So I think her main goal is just to get her name, away from this messy situation here in Georgia.
So you don't think she's going to try to get her son to cough up some money for all the damage he's made to her reputation with the tax evasion? I also heard that they, like you said, they had unpaid wages. I also heard they were using money to inappropriate conduct. I don't want to get specific as to what it was, but clearly, I'd imagine, aside from the fact that you had this restaurant with your son, he's also your son, so to some degree, he's going to be tied to you regardless of if you have this business venture or not. But do you think she is going to go after whatever monetary damages she has incurred as a result of his actions, or no? I
don't think so. If that's what she wanted, I think she could probably handle that another way other than the lawsuit.
Court.
Yeah, but and the other part of this is that you never really know is obviously she's the client, so she makes the ultimate decision. But we don't know how much something like this is driven by her attorneys in terms of, we know this is your son, you don't want to do it, but you really need to protect your name and your likeness, and so. We don't think this is going to be a long, drawn-out thing, but this is what we need to do. And she may have been, who knows, she may have been reluctant to do this. She may have been sitting on this for months or years, knowing that she needed. And I think they allude to that in the complaint, that she's been thinking about it for some time, from removing her name from this restaurant. But you're right, I guess it's her son, so she's trying to help him be successful as well. But at some point, you just got to sever the business ties anyway. So, and we don't know all that. It could be the opposite. It could be like, sue that SOB. Well, she wouldn't say SOB right. Because then she'd be...
Or because she could be, if she's thinking about her brand, she could be saying, I want to make sure it's clear that I'm disassociating myself with these activities. Right. And nothing does that to some degree better than a public complaint that gets people reading and everyone's attention on it. So, but I am curious because, if you're also saying that perhaps she was thinking about it a while back. He was arrested back in June, and so if she's been thinking about this since 2009 when the agreement expired, then perhaps this wasn't the straw. Maybe it was something else. But then this just, came to the head, and the attorneys, like you said, say, look, enough is enough. It's really time.
Yeah, and that very well could be. But like I said, I think it'll probably, and as far as what right does the receiver have the right to continue to use the name, if they don't just voluntarily stop doing it, then I would imagine at some point they're going to have to be hauled into court. So the court can decide whether this receiver, but I don't think a receiver can have any more rights than, the underlying owner has. So I find it hard to believe that, as much as the state would like to be able to continue to use her name, assuming that the restaurants stay open, because there's some allegation that they're not doing very well anymore financially. So it may all become a moot point if the restaurants just close.
I'm very interested to see this agreement, both the written and the oral one, because I think that's going to also play a huge role in how she could terminate, her license with the company, as well as what type of, renewal periods, and just the agreement itself, the terms speaks to as to the license. Because I know she's also claiming I'm not getting paid anymore, so I guess technically it was a mutual termination. I just need my name off the sign, but nonetheless, it'd be interesting to see how both sides show who has the right to the license, like you said. So.
Right.
But now, before we leave, what are your predictions? Do you think that she'll be successful, or do you think that the receiver will be able to continue to use her name?
I don't think the receiver will be able to continue to use her name. I mean, the license has clearly been, well, in my opinion, has been terminated. I don't think the receiver has an argument that they can continue to use it, not without some additional license agreement being put in place. I mean, I guess that's another possible outcome, that they renegotiate the agreement with her where she would receive some additional compensation or something like that. But just from reading everything, I get the feeling, especially if her son isn't going to be involved in the ongoing operations of the restaurant, that her main goal is to have the restaurant stop using her name. And she has very good attorneys, so I expect that's what's going to happen.
If I'd imagine if the son is already saying my hands are tied, she didn't put the state, which I guess she could have if that's in the amended complaint. But it sounds like if they're saying my hands are tied, the only thing I can do is give you monetary damages for this until you put the right party in charge. But I guess we'll find out.
We'll find out. So.
Well, interesting nonetheless when you have that mother and son dynamic when it comes to these lawsuits. Well, thanks for explaining that.
Sure.
We'll definitely have to keep our listeners posted. And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.